So next up, we're going to have Marcie Gallagher from VPIRG, and she's going to talk about a bill that has to do with regulating toxic chemicals in products. And this is something, just really briefly, before Marcie goes into the details of that, this is something that Vermont as a state has ended up doing over and over again because we have a federal chemical regulatory system that has basically failed. It sets up a standard, unlike pharmaceuticals where you do testing and prove something is safe before it goes on the market. For industrial chemicals, they go on the market and then you have to prove that there's a problem with them, which is really hard to do and has proven to be almost impossible. And very few chemicals, I think only 5 in the history of out of the 90,000 plus chemicals that are registered for use in the US have ever been regulated through the scheme they have. So it's just this fundamentally broken system. And Vermont has really been a leader in trying to protect people from toxic chemicals. And there's a number of states who have kind of played that role, and we've been one of them. And it's really driven the market to safer chemicals and safer products. So it's a space that we regulated flame retardants and BPA and lead and mercury and so some chemicals you might have heard of through the years. And so PFAS chemicals are another place where we need to make progress. And I'll turn it over to Marcie now to talk about what is likely to be in front of you this year.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. So again, Marcie Gallagher, I think a couple of you I don't know. So I'm VPIRG's environmental associate. I use she, her pronouns. And to reiterate Lauren's point, the US system of regulating chemicals is totally backwards, and it's not like this all over the world. And a lot of times we look to EU's example. They have a much stronger chemical regulatory system. And for that reason, they're much farther ahead of us on PFAS regulation, which ends up being helpful for us because then we can say, oh, well, this product has a safer alternative. A lot of these things that I'll be referencing, we only know because the EU is so much farther ahead of us. So it is really essential to be the first state, or to be one of the first states to do this, because other states will look at this example, and we can't just rely, like Lauren said, on what the federal government has regulated already or even what they tell us is safe. But up until now, Vermont has really focused specifically for PFAS on downstream contamination, which protects us from these chemicals once they've entered our water and our environment. But in this bill S.20, Vermont can restrict PFAS upstream, which would prevent further exposure and contamination by getting it out of our environment before we're even exposed in the first place. And S.20 really builds on the work of other states to restrict the use of PFAS and other toxic substances from firefighting foam, food packaging, residential carpets and rugs, and ski wax. And I'm going to briefly go through each of these products and talk about why they're important. So starting off with Class B firefighting foam, the use of this firefighting foam accounts for about 1/3 of total global PFAS pollution. So it's really a big one. There's a lot of good news here. The PFAS-free foam market is well established, it's cost competitive, and most importantly, it's supported by firefighters, and they like to use it. 8 states already have banned or restricted PFAS-containing foam, and 7 states, excluding Vermont, are also considering this this session. So, second product is food packaging, and food packaging is often treated with PFAS for things like water and grease resistance. And this includes types of packaging like sandwich wrappers, popcorn bags, bakery bags, lots of different types of to-go containers. They've all been tested and found to contain PFAS. And this is concerning because when chemicals are used in food packaging, they migrate to our food, which we then ingest into our body. And for that reason, the toxic chemical classes of phthalates and bisphenols are also included in this bill. But for a typical adult, dietary exposure is likely to be the single largest exposure pathway of PFAS. And so the states of Washington, Maine, and New York, and retailers like Panera Bread, Taco Bell, Trader Joe's, and Whole Foods have banned PFAS in food packaging. And most recently, we got the good news that McDonald's announced that they would ban PFAS from their food packaging. The next product category is residential carpets and rugs. This is really a no-brainer because PFAS serve no essential function in carpets and rugs. They're just added for certain stain and water resistant properties, which can be achieved with other materials. And carpets made with PFAS release chemicals over time into the air and dust in our homes. And the exposure to PFAS from rugs and carpets is particularly concerning when you consider what segment of our population spends the most time with their faces in rugs and carpets, which is kids. And the CDC named carpet as the #1 exposure pathway to PFAS for infants and toddlers. So it is really concerning. The good news on this one is that Lowe's and Home Depot have already banned PFAS from the use of residential rugs and carpets sold in their stores. They're industry giants. And Washington and California are restricting PFAS in carpets and carpet treatments sold through administrative processes. And our bill also bans PFAS from aftermarket treatment for rugs and carpets, just to make sure that companies aren't just selling rugs without PFAS only to spray them on right before you buy them. So we just want to close up that loophole. And as with all products containing PFAS, they don't stop causing harm once we're done using them, because when products are disposed of in landfills, the chemicals are then released into the liquid that leaves the landfill or the leachate, and they ultimately make their way into our waterways. So the last product category and the most recently added is ski wax. And this pertains to just some specific high-end wax applied primarily for Nordic ski racing. And it's been proven to contaminate the surrounding environment. So the snow melts and the PFAS trickle down into the soil, into the groundwater. And one of the reasons this came to our attention is because several water systems in Vermont with high level of PFAS were located in ski areas. So this is an area of concern for Vermont specifically. It's very relevant. But there's good news here as well. The intercollegiate Nordic ski teams in the East have banned PFAS wax from their races, and the FIS, which is the sport's international governing body, it oversees Nordic skiing's World Cup. They announced back in late 2019 that they'll begin enforcing a ban on the wax, but still consumers can buy this wax at stores, so we do want to get it off the shelves. And the very last important thing about S.20 is that it ensures that we know which children's products contain toxic PFAS. So S.20 adds the class of PFAS chemicals to the state's list of chemicals of high concern to children, which was established in Act 188. And adding PFAS to this list will help inform caregivers and public health officials about where toxic PFAS chemicals are being used in products sold in Vermont and marketed to children. So that is the full picture of S.20, and happy to take any questions.